Okay, so let's go through the entire process of really hiring therapists, associates, essentially. So obviously, you would first put out an ad, and then whatever responses you get from the ad, from there, you would send each and every candidate the job description. The job description can be basically a very short document, 1 to 2 pages max, around the expectations and the role that they're going to play and the responsibilities that come with that role, so that they know what they're actually walking into before they do an interview. Because a lot of the times, you don't want to be wasting half an hour to 45 minutes in interviews when this person could just look at the expectations and go, well, you know what, this is just not for me. Well, then you know that they're not an ideal candidate and you don't really be wanting to waste any more time with them. So this document's really useful, just to jot down some bullet points on what things are expected. For example, the coaching sessions for my associates. So my associates get coached 1 hour a week, and essentially those are mandatory. So for a practitioner to be the best version of themselves, they need to be growing clinically, professionally, and personally. And I'm there to help them do just that. So if they don't arrive to those coaching sessions, well, they can't get that information, which means that they're not going to be a good team player. They're not going to connect with their team, and they're not going to be able to grow their clinical skills in the way that I need them to grow for this particular practice. So that's something important to put in job description. So if there are anything that's going to be mandatory, for example, another expectation would be the fact that all of us should be doing 2 to 3 month um, review processes. So, that should be something that's stated in the document that every 2 months we'll be running stats on you and that you will be expected to perform at certain KPI levels and meet targets, etc. So, if there are certain things that you expect of your associate, that when the time comes, you tell them, hey, you need to do this, and you're not wanting to hear the answer, no, I'm not going to, or any rebuttal there, then those are definitely things to be adding into your job description, because that's something that the associate needs to know is going to happen if they were to take this job. Once the job description is sent, it's basically sent in an email saying, hey, please have a read through the job description. And if you're good to go ahead with this after reading this, then please let me know which one of the following time slots suits you best for an interview. Once you set the interview process is really important. And here's the thing, a lot of the times, we get pretty wound up in looking for the best practitioner clinically speaking. And when I say clinically speaking, a lot of us really look for hands on clinical expertise. That is actually not what you want. Hands on work can actually be taught, and it's one of the skills that can be taught pretty easily. What can't be taught easily is how you communicate with clients. And the reason why that cannot be taught easily is because that comes down to what your associate or what that particular individual believes in. So, what you're looking for in your interview questions is not so much the clinical hands on expertise, but really what's their character? What's their personality? Are they adaptive? Do they want to grow and learn? My practice is all about growth. That is my two main values for me personally, but also the extension into my practice is growth and contribution. I consistently I'm hungry to grow myself so that I can contribute to the world. Now, if I don't have an associate or any team member really who isn't on board with that and they don't want to grow, they just want certainty or they just want significance, well, then we're not really going to match here. And although it might seem a good fit in the beginning because, wow, they gave me the best massage or they knew exactly what to do with my lower back pain when I assessed them during the interview, well, give it 3 to 6 months time and that relationship is going to get toxic because your values don't match. So what you want to see in an interview process is, do your values match? Is this person of the same values? Will they fit into this particular team? Or are you just trying to create space for them for the heck of it? And you want to also start seeing what are their views on a client journey. So one of the main questions I ask because I'm very big on retention. My practice, I get headaches if I have to get more and more new clients. I am big on retention. If you retain a client, it's way better for your practice. That's my opinion. So, one of my main questions in the interview process for an associate is, what's your viewpoint on care plans? Meaning, if I were a client and I came to you for the very first visit, what would you do? What would you say? How would you educate me? And let's say you did a report visit and then you started care with me. What is the next couple of weeks going to look like? And they usually tell me, and actually one of my recent associates said to me, well, yeah, I put them on twice a week or 3 times a week, depending on the individual symptoms. And then after a reassessment, moved them to once a week, and then once every 2 weeks, and 3 weeks, and then 4 weeks. And apparently he said, once a month is basically the maintenance that he suggests. So I asked him why. What's the reason for that? Because are you just doing it because that's what you were taught at school? I want to know your why. So he was a bit taken back by that. And usually all your associates, if you ask these questions, you'll notice that they're going to have to start thinking in the interview process. And he said, well, that's the maintenance level. And I said, what are you maintaining? And he said, well, we've made the changes and now I'm maintaining the changes. And I could see already, because he was smiling, because I was starting to find holes in this particular story or this belief of his. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, I heard that you mentioned that you like going to the gym and that you work out and that you love the personal training side of things. And he said, yeah. And I said to him, okay, well, what are your goals? Like, what do you do? And, he told me his goals and what he wanted to achieve out of the personal training. And I said, okay. And I said, so do you think you've achieved that? And he said, yeah, I feel pretty good and I can do what I wanted to do. And I said, okay. So I'm assuming now that you go to the gym once every month. And he smiled and he said, no. And I said, well, why not? Because that's your premise, right? You just told me that once you fix something or once you get what you want, you somehow have this arbitrary number of once a month maintenance. Or is it that, physical training can't be maintained once a month, but chiropractic care can be done once a month? And he was stifled. He didn't know what to say. But here's the thing. It's okay if they're stifled. That doesn't mean that he was wrong. I just know that this is how he was educated. What I'm looking for here, though, is how adaptive he is to this message that I'm bringing to him. So I went on and I said, do I have your permission to, share some knowledge here? And he said, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I explained to him that in my point of view, with chiropractic care and how I do what I do, for example, I wouldn't put a person on maintenance of once a month because that would mean that all the stresses that they have for that long, somehow their body is just going to sustain perfect health through that time. That's not going to work, right? So for me, it's about chiropractic care should be a lifestyle choice that everyone chooses to have in their routine. So the question becomes, it's not about the, arbitrary number of like once a month maintenance. It's about, okay, I've got the changes I wanted. I'm at a point where I can function at my best. This is where I can sustain my relationships at a good level. This is the level I can, function with my kids. I can function at work. I can be social in a regulated way. So what do I want from here? And right now, to sustain what I'm doing in my life, I'm seeing my chiropractor once a week. So the question to the client then isn't about, well, do you want to just go once a month to maintain? It's like, okay, do you still want to sustain these changes? Because if you do, I think you need to choose once a week. And if you want to push that out a little bit, sure, choose once every fortnight. But that's going to change the outcome. And so when I got him to see that and I got him to see the educational response that I would have had with a client around the client's journey of care and their experience in this practice, he was blown away and he loved it. He said, you know what? I have never thought of it like that. And he said, I'm reflecting back And I'm like, holy shit, what the hell have I been doing? Now he's not a bad practitioner, right? Like he was retaining quite a lot of his clients in his previous practice, and he was doing really, really well actually. But for me, it wasn't about, oh, okay, you see 80 clients a week, that's fantastic. I wanted to know his true value down there, his belief. What did he really believe? And what I noticed was he believed something that was borrowed. He was educated a certain way, he was conditioned a certain way, and now he believed that. Fine. What I'm trying to see in the interview process is he adaptive to change? Can he see the other side? And can he go, whoa, this is interesting. I'm open to learning. You want an associate who's open to learning. The associate who says, well, you know what? I've done this for 15 years and I've got a lot of experience. To me, that's a red flag. I don't really trust those kind of people, to be honest. But a person who sits there and says, you know, I have worked in the field for 15 years. I do have a lot of clinical experience, but I've kind of hit a point and I want to learn more. Ah, that's my candidate. That's the golden ticket right there. Or when they say, no, I hear what you're saying and I've never thought about it like that. And it makes sense. That's the golden ticket right there. Because they're showing you that they can be adaptive. And that is really key in an interview with an associate. You do not want an associate who's just got 15, 20 years of clinical experience and who's been the best at their job. That's great. All the respect to them. But when they step into your practice and they cannot be adaptive and they cannot be open to change, what is that going to mean in 3 to 6 months' time when your protocol is a little bit different and that puts them out of their comfort zone? Is that going to be taken well? Are you going to have the same issues over and over again? So it's really important that your interview process with an associate is so key. That is one of the key things with bringing on an associate is your interview process. Do not ask them so many questions about, you know, what would you do if a person presented with lower back pain? It's, you know, there's no assessment there. Like that's like almost like I'm hoping that that's basic stuff. Like they're not going to injure a client. I would hope that. But what you're wanting to ask is their beliefs around things. Have you ever sold a concession package? What are your viewpoints on a concession package? And if the person's like, oh, I think concession packages are absolutely crap, you know, how could you manipulate someone to buy 24 visits? Ooh, they they believe something there, something odd. I would take an opportunity to educate them a little bit to see if they would change the standpoint. And if they don't, if they say, no, I hear you, but I don't know, I don't think it works. Okay, this guy or girl, woman, man has made a decision without learning anything. I wonder if that's going to fit well with my team. I wonder if that shows signs of growth. I don't think so. It shows signs of certainty, wanting to be in a certain bubble. So if they're open to change, that's a good candidate, all right? Now, another thing you want to think about is also let them know during the interview process about your team culture and watch for their response. You know, you should know what your team culture is. For me, my team is my family. You know, I walk into my practice and they always have my favorite tea ready because they know me just like I know them. I know their favorite coffees. I know when they're stressed out. I know how to chill them out. I know what helps them. I know the words they like for encouragement because I've known them on a human level. And that's really key, right? So if you've got a team culture, a certain way you do things, a certain way, like, you know, if you do pre and post shift huddles and things like that, first of all, I ask, you know, what was the team culture like at your last place? And they're like, Oh, I don't know. Like, what do you mean? Wow. They've never really, even though they were a part of a team, they weren't really a part of a team, if that makes sense. So then I say, well, this is what we do. This is what we expect. My associates never ever speak down to my staff. This is an issue I find with a lot of practices where associates think that they could just, speak however with the staff because they're a practitioner and this is just a front desk person. That's a red flag for me because that doesn't happen in my practice. That's not okay. I think staff are absolutely valuable, sometimes more valuable than practitioners, because they are the executioners of every appointment. You could do a fabulous job hands-on on a client, and your staff could completely ruin the experience. So staff are important. Does this associate see that? Do they value that? And again, if they don't, for whatever reason, for whatever conditioning that they've had, if you educate them in that moment, are they open to it? A beautiful question I ask in one of my interviews, I say to people, do you ever lie? And I watch them just absolutely get flustered because they all want to say no, because who wants to tell the future boss, yeah, I lie? But the smart people, they understand that I know, well, clearly everyone knows, everyone has lied at some point in their lives, right? So I phrase these questions in a way because I want to see what their response is like. Can they be truthful to me? Can they say it how it is? Because guess what? I am slowly, even in that interview process, even though they haven't got the job yet, I am conditioning them for what it's going to be like when they get the job. That's the key as well. So, with regards to the pay, now that's really up to you how you want to pay your associate. So for me, I do a sliding scale. So there are a couple of ways you can pay. Normally over here, we would not really pay salary, but I have worked with a few practice owners now, and I've noticed that some of you pay salary to your practitioners. And if that works well for your practice, then that works for you. Otherwise, you can do flat percentage, meaning no matter what you earn, you get a flat percentage of 50% you take and 50% I take, or 60-40, or whatever it is. Sliding scale is a bit of a win-win, and I like that because it drives them to do more because it's an incentive. And what I mean by sliding scale, and this is just hypothetical numbers here, is that let's say your sliding scale starts at 45%. And so what it means is that any dollars, for me, dollars that you earned between 0 to, say, arbitrarily 500, you get 45%. If you've earned anything from 500 to 1,000, you get 50%. Anything from 1,000 to 2,000, 55%. And then you hit a max, and let's say the max is 60%. You can also make more of an incentive after that by saying, well, if you consecutively hit 60%, as in you earned this much consecutively for a month where you got 60%, well, that tells me that you're doing a fab job, and I really want to acknowledge that and honor that. And because of that, I will then raise the baseline sliding percentage to 50 or 55%, which means they no longer get applicable for 45%. They go straight on to 50 or 55%. But here's the thing. If you decide to do that in your practice, be aware that again, you're dealing with human beings. What happens in that moment where they go, yay, thank you so much? And then they go, I don't really want to work that hard. And now their baseline is 55%, but they're no longer hitting the mark that they were. So if you are putting that in your contract, I suggest that you put some subclause or something whereby you have to still meet the standard required to be at a baseline of 50 or 55%. Otherwise, you go back down to the baseline percentage that you started off with, which is 45. In terms of figuring out, maybe I've had this question before, well, how do I figure out the sliding scale increments? Like I said, 0 to 500, 500 to 1,000. and also how much percentage to pay them, etc. Well, you have to figure out how much you make and work backwards. And also keep in mind about so what you need to think about is the length of the appointment type, the length of the appointment, and how much you're charging the client, and then work backwards from there, right? So do it that way. Also, please know that it's not a negotiation. I I worked with a practice owner who, was trying to ask me, well, how do I do I just go up to my potential associate, and say, this is what I'm thinking of paying. What are your thoughts? Oh, no, do not ask them. This is not a negotiation. This is your practice. You're the owner. You make the rules. And then you find people that will fit in well with those rules. All right. So it's not a negotiation. Just make sure that you've got your numbers correct, work with the numbers well, and make sure that it's a win-win situation. Remember, and I've been telling quite a few practice owners recently in private calls that, you know, it's not a what's best for me. If you do that, you lose your team. You have to work out what's best for them too. That doesn't mean give yourself up and give everything to them so that you're just absolutely drained or that you go into a loss, right? That's not what I'm saying. But here's the thing, and this is again one of the culture points that I have in my practice. It has to be a win-win. How much are you supporting them and how much are they supporting you? Let's now go on to, the fact that you've interviewed your associate. You then want to run a final interview or like a final meeting session if you know this is the right candidate you want to sign on. And you want to start telling them what it's going to look like when they join. This is where you discuss the onboarding process. Sorry, not discuss, tell them the onboarding process. So for us, the onboarding process is a 4-week training session first. And in that time, they're not seeing new clients. And what they're doing every day is observing every practitioner on every different type of visit. This is so important. This is so that they can really shadow each and every practitioner. And if I were to be practicing, to be honest, they would most likely just be observing me. So if you're practicing, I highly suggest that they only observe you. They can observe another practitioner here and there, but most of their observations should be done with the principal practitioner. And if you're not practicing, if you've left practice and you still own a practice and running a practice, pick your top associate or two and get them to shadow them. But here's the thing, after every observation shift, let's say 12 p.m., the observation shift finishes. At that point, for an hour and a half, we do training. And I don't leave it for another day. I do it straight after the observation because first I want to get feedback. What did you observe? What are some things that were done differently? What did you not agree with? Because that's something I want to know. I always ask for feedback on what do you not agree with? Because that's not for me to go, oh, okay, I hear you. Yeah, sure. Okay, we can do it your way. No, that gives me an insight about their conditioning. And I go, ooh, okay, that conditioning is not going to work here. So how am I going to recondition this person? How am I going to get them to see the why behind why we do what we do and how we do it? Why is that important? And why is it even more important for them to get on board with that? Okay. So we do training. So in that 4 weeks, alongside with the observation, they get trained on, you want to train on new patient visits, report of findings visits. What do you say on the first treatment session? What do you say after the first treatment is delivered? What do you say in the first? So, for example, we have stages of care. So the 12th visit generally is a reassessment visit. What do you talk about as a practitioner between visit 1 and 12? Because I do not want to hear my associates talk about their weekend or their dog or their kids or random stuff. Those 12 visits are so important. You're still trying to establish to this person why they should be coming in. This person is not educated enough. 12 visits is not even enough. So you shouldn't have time to talk about your dog. You should only have time to educate them. So what I do is I have documented everything that I would find myself educating my very brand new clients on. I'm a chiropractor by trade, so in the initial stage, it's all about just, fixing their pain. They want to get comfortable. They're inflamed, they're dysregulated, they're high in tension, their proprioception's all off. So these are my key points. I talk about active passive tension, proprioception, muscle tension, inflammation, range of motion, movement, all of these things. I don't talk about all these points in the one visit. I may actually take 2 to 3 visits just to finish one point. But depending on what I assess on the day and what I'm finding, what I'm hearing from the client, I will choose which one I want to use to educate. But see, I could do it without even having these points listed. My associates can't. So I have to document this to give it to my associate so that they can follow something. So that's something I definitely go in detail on the first 4 weeks of training. I don't really go through the reassessment process and all of that because they're not really up to that point yet. The next thing they have to do in those first 4 weeks, and I really encourage every practice to do this if you have front desk staff and a space for front desk things to happen. They are to spend 2 hours minimum at front desk being trained by a front desk staff. And that's right, my practitioners get trained by my staff because I break very quickly this hierarchy of staff being under a practitioner. That's how I do it, by getting them to train the practitioner to begin with. And they're going to learn the basics, how to create an appointment, how to make an invoice, how to do a payment, and how to reschedule an appointment here or there. Just the basics. In case, if a staff member cannot come to shift and the practitioner has to do something for that time, they're going to have to know the basics of how to just, work the EFTPOS machine and get a booking done and an invoice done. They don't have to worry about all the other recalls and things like that. That's okay. But that could be learned in like half an hour. But I keep it 2 hours minimum because I want the practitioner to sit there and be in awe of this staff member and see the effort that this staff member is making every single shift, and sometimes the absolute crap that they deal with over the desk. Depending on how well the training is going, if the person's like amazing and really picking it up, because guess what? When I train them, I say, okay, see you later. I'll see you tomorrow for your next lot of training. I send them the video on what we trained on. So I've got videos and written scripts on the new patient protocol, the report protocol, the first visit protocol, all of that. So then it's like, hey, we did this today. You better read it, you watch it, and we're going to recap tomorrow. Always remember, when you're training an associate, you have to recap. Don't just be like, Monday we're going to do new patient, Tuesday we're going to do report of findings. Where's the recap from Monday? Right? And let it draw out. Practice owners feel so uncomfortable to let things just be in its time. And I get it. We want things to work fast, right? Because we're fast, which is why we own the practice. But you're leading a team that doesn't own the practice. You've got to think about that. So you have to make sure that you're okay with sitting in the discomfort of, oh my God, it's taken like 3 days for this person to try and get their head around the new patient visit. It's okay. That's okay. You rather get them to do it slow and well than fast and just not retain anything. That's such a waste of time and energy and resources. Okay, so if they're doing really well, I don't think it's happened yet, but I may, on the 3rd week, give them a new client. Otherwise, definitely with all my associates, this has happened because the onboarding process has been so structured for them that by the 4th week, I do give them 2 to 3 new clients. All the while, they're still observing stuff, they're still training, they're still doing everything that was laid out for them. but they get to get hands-on and put things to practice. And I say to them, the first 6 clients, I'm not gonna intervene. And this is really important to do that because you show them that you trust them. You give them personal empowerment because you've kind of just been breathing down their neck the last 4 weeks, and I get that. Now it's kind of like, whew, have a breather. Utilize the skills I've taught you and go and fly. And I say that. I'm like, just go hard, have fun. How many of your associates don't have fun? I don't know. But a lot of practice owners, if I spoke to your associates and really got feedback from them, they may not be having fun. Maybe because they're waiting for your permission. I don't know. So I always say, just have fun. Learn everything, do it well, do what I've told you to, have fun. After the 6th new client, I come in, I step in, and I observe the next 2 new clients. I definitely sit there and observe. And they will be nervous, and that's okay. I know which part of them screwed up because they were nervous versus, that they were just not doing a good job. But I make really good notes, and I say that, and afterwards we brief and we go, and what I'm observing is not just the clinical staff, it's about, when I observe the client sitting there, and I'm like, as a practitioner, I know what's going on here. I know what the client is not saying and how we could go deeper here. I know that this client already has this objection, and I could overcome it before that objection left that client's mouth. But this didn't happen here. I wonder why. And I start jotting these notes down. And then when I brief them, the briefing is not like, hey, so these are the things you did wrong. This is how I would do it. No one wants to hear that. How awful, right? So I ask them, I say, hey, when this person said that, I'm curious, what was your thought process? It was interesting to me. Get genuinely interested and curious about your associates and their headspaces. We don't because we're judging it. We don't because we want it to just change instantaneously. Like we're like, why didn't you say like the exact words I have written down? So get curious. Why did they do that? Because if you don't, and you just say to them, you did this, and you need to change it like this, they haven't learned anything. To be able to change, to be able to make a change, you have to understand the why. Why did it happen in the first place? Because there was a thought process. Why was there a thought? Why was it this thought process? Because they believed something. Why did they believe this? Because there was conditioning. So you just telling them crap to do is not going to work. Go back to the beginning and go, got to change that conditioning. Let's change that belief. Let's flip that belief. Let's change your state around this. Oh, now your language is changing. Oh, now your focus has changed. I don't even then have to tell them what to do. Then it happens in flow because they get it now. They organically get it. When you don't allow them to organically get it, they're just robotic because you didn't teach them how to apply the concept. You just taught them to do something. Just do it. They didn't learn anything. There's a difference between a doer and a thinker. So you have to understand that if your associates are not performing well, if they're not doing this and they're not doing that, and you're sitting here and you're thinking, oh my God. And I actually spoke to someone yesterday, and we were working together, and he said he's got an associate who he's tried to train for 8 years. I said, you should have fired him 7.5 years ago. If you're there are two things happening. Either, and I'm not going to deny it, maybe the associate's just not good. Maybe they're just not a good fit for the team. Great, fire them. Move on to the next person. But don't underestimate, what you're bringing to the table. Are you really doing a good job as a practice owner? And that can be confronting. Be the change you want to see in your associates. If they're not getting the training, don't just keep hitting them with the same training. Change it. Jazz it up a bit. Make it fun.